you know, this is why I like to go around. Every district has a unique character and it's a unique interest. And so I'm going to have to talk more about the zip code project because of half the questions were about that. So I'm gonna do some other things first. Hold on here. This is what happened. See, I talked to everybody who came up except ignoring it. Now I'm organized. So let me talk about Healthy Church Initiative. Let me deal with a few quick things. The Healthy Church Initiative was started in the Missouri Conference, and basically it is a year-long process in which both the clergy person of a church and the laity of a church are involved in terms of learning, studying, reading, and praying together. There's always a clergy group that's doing this, and then there are some lay groups that are doing this. And so there will be a team from a local church. And as you move through reading the books and doing some exploration together, then at the end of the process, the coach for the project, who's one of our clergy, be a clergy and a lay person from the annual conference, will then write out some prescriptions, some different prescriptions. And then the church chooses whether to adopt them or not adopt them. So it's Vic, am I right? It's about 9 months or a year? 3 months?
3 years.
Oh, it's 3 years. You should never ask me detailed questions like this.
So it's, your first, for the Healthy Church Initiative, it's like the first 9 months. And there's a clergy group and a lay group, each have their own coach, and they work through a series of books and discussions for a significant period of time. Then they make the decision whether to continue. If they continue, they go for the second year, which Wesley Methodist Church is currently in. And I think this month, you're going to have your consultation weekend. And that will take place, I think, in 2 or 3 weekends. And that's a full weekend that a consultant comes in, team comes in, you have a weekend of pretty intense work. Sunday afternoon, Wesley will gather together and hear the prescriptions that the consultant, having heard the discussion of the church, gives to the congregation to say, these are what we heard from you as things that you need to be working on to get more vitality into your congregation. Then the church has got to decide yes or no whether to take all of the prescriptions that have been suggested. If the church agrees to take all of them, then you move on to the next piece of Healthy Church Initiative, which is implementing those prescriptions. And you will have, and there's a coach involved in that, and there are timelines and things as well. So by the end of the process, there is a clear transformation of the congregation into a whole new place. That's Healthy Church. There's also one called Small Church Initiative, which is also available and will start again in the fall. And it is a little more time restricted. Clergy and lay work together, and the time frame is less. It doesn't take quite as long, but it's still a very intensive process of revitalizing the congregation.
Now you see why they do not let me travel alone. Thank you, Vic. Every time I do one of these, a superintendent has to step in and remind me of things that escape me occasionally, and it just happens. I mean, Vic works more closely with it than I do, so So thanks, Vic. And I believe that only if your church has an interest, you need to see your superintendent, and because I know that we're working on putting the next group of churches together. Am I right?
Yes.
So, do not tell Jim Osier that I failed miserably in explaining this, one of our colleagues. Okay, do you have anything to say? Well, there's more to the question, but I have lots to say, but about the importance of being progressive with our use of technology. Well, I'm for it. One of the things we realize is that we do live in a digital age, and we've chosen to do, in terms of news from the annual conference, we've chosen to do, still do the newspaper and do digital too. We think we need to do both. And I don't know if you're talking about technology in the church, that kind of, or what. I actually have someone who's helping me tweet now. Now, y'all may think that's funny, but I got to tell you, I was at First Church Dallas last night on this place at the table, and I did one tweet, and all of a sudden, you know, it got sent out in a lot of different ways. And so I and then all of a sudden, I gathered 10 new followers in less than an hour. I don't think I say anything particularly unique, but it is the way in which people connect with each other. And so I'm for it. It's just that I'm in the middle of something and I'm moving so fast and my schedule can be so full that I forget to use the technology that's on my phone just for Facebook or Twitter, those kinds of things. So I need to say that. If we're talking about worship, I need to tell you that I know that people have all different kinds of opinions. And I said at an administrative board meeting about the year before I left First Hearst, when we were talking about redoing the sanctuary because we were completing a massive organ project. I said, we're going to have to place screens in the sanctuary. And I mean, you would have thought, because of who I am, people actually thought, who are you and what did you do with our pastor? But I want to tell you, there's some times I wish I'd had a screen to show something. And there are times I think I'm a fairly effective storyteller, and times I'm not. But I can remember talking about just a piece of art and how it hit me when I saw it in St. Peter's Basilica, and it was the Pietà. And our minister of music came up to me after and said, you know, I know how resistant you are, and I concur because of the way you think about it. But when you were describing the Pietà, you need to know that half the people, they'd forgotten. Or they may have not had been teaching art since you left school, which was his way of saying they don't teach art in school the way they used to 57, 80 years ago. So, you know, but I think technology is very important, and we got to remember this has become, and I heard it from somewhere else, so I'm just adopting it. We've got to be more connected to the mission than to the model. The problem is we get connected to the model or the process rather than the mission. And so that, you know, God's gift to me, and in terms of being a bishop, is this. I've become acquainted with so many different ways of performing the mission. And I realized that in my life I'd been too connected to the model. And I have been surprised about the different kinds of models I've seen in North Texas. And what I say is I've learned to embrace things I would have never thought about embracing before in my life. And it sort of reminds me of an illustration I've used in terms of sermon, in terms of our even openness, in terms of our own hearts and souls, and even to the ongoing revelation of God, is think about being a trapeze artist. Since I hate heights, this is a stretch for me, but if you're a trapeze artist, you're holding tightly onto that bar. But you know, if you're supposed to get to another place, you have to let go of the safety of that bar to grab on to the next thing. And frankly, for me, that's what the faith is about, is letting go of that which is secure and taking the risk on being able to grab the next thing. Because faith means risk. Okay. I had a couple questions about the PowerPoint slides available, so let me share with you about this. So the book from the back team document is 80, 90 pages long. We're getting ready to post on the North Texas Conference website the full report along with an executive summary. And we're still refining the executive summary because I think that it shouldn't be any longer than 2 pages if it's an executive summary. So we'll post all of that online. The slides will be online, and so you can use them in a way that you choose to use them. But this is my only hope and promise, that you can set the context well. So if you use them in your church, be very deliberate about not just showing them, but be deliberate about the context, why we did it, and then use it as a way to talk about how we need to open ourselves up to getting better, not to bash where we are. Everybody with me? So it's just the way in which you use them. That's just my prayer about that. But you know, it's you're going to hear more about a annual conference, and so that's a piece. What classes are there to learn how to do hospital visitation? So I don't know how to really where this is coming from. So let me make a stab at it. I think if you're a lay person and your church is asks you to do some regular visitation, I think your pastor can be helpful to you. But in terms of classes that are available, we were talking about lay servants. Somebody came up to me. Did they do that lay servant ministry training about visitation in hospitals or anything?
There is a pastoral care course in there.
Okay, so we have to look at in that piece. That may be a way to ask the person who's charged in the district for that. But can I just sort of tell you my way of doing it? Would that help? Let me just give a crash course. I never stayed too long. People who are in the hospital are really sick now because they send you home pretty quickly because it's expensive to keep you there. I did more listening than I did talking. And I did no diagnosis of medical conditions. No, I'm serious. And I always provided a word of hope. And an acknowledgement about what was happening. I didn't ask too many questions. I didn't ask them, what's wrong with you? And, I'm a pastor. I wouldn't go in, what brings you here? They may want to be private about it. Just because, I felt like just because I was a pastor didn't mean that I had the unfettered access to their medical history. Does that make sense? So I'd always go in, I'd identify who I was. And I need to tell you, when I was at Hearst, it scared people when I walked in the room because they thought something was really wrong with me. And I went every week, but they didn't think pastors of larger congregations went and visit the hospital. So, hey, I'm going to do a little something here. So I'm going to do it with Melba, okay? Right, so I'd always come in, and here's the thing: if somebody's lying on their back and you're standing over them, can you imagine how imposing that is? Now, just the physical pieces are as important as anything. So I always pulled up a chair. And I always sat down so that I could be out of it. And I could look at a person in the face. Otherwise, it looked like I was in a hurry. Just the way in which you do this physically is important. And I would say, how are you feeling today? We don't have to role play this, but how are you doing? And now, when did you come in? Remind me of that. And that sparked a conversation. I'd always make some comment in the room, I always look for something positive to say. And I'd say, there sure are a lot of people who love you, if you can see by the flowers and the cards. You notice what you see and it says something. This is just be you. And now this is something I learned not to ask. Is there anything I can do for you? Because I got a couple of odd requests and I decided I would never ask that question again. So I was 24 years old, intern, First Methodist Fort Worth, second hospital day. I asked this woman, is there anything I can do for you? Well, if I gave you the keys to my home, would you go by and get my nightgown? Now look, this is before we became really clued in about about things in terms of boundaries and those kinds of things, but something inside me said, don't do it. For a number of reasons. Now, I laugh about it now, but it literally scared me to death. I go, I'm in a bad way here. So I said, I think it would be better if a family member of yours or a friend did that. I'm unable to do that. So be careful about what you ask. And I always ask feeling questions for the most part. Well, no, I don't. I mean, let's say, so have you heard a good word from your doctor? I always said, have you heard a good word from your doctor? It does one of two things. One is many times people have had a good word, believe it or not, but they don't focus on the good word. So it helps them focus on the healing that may be going on, even though they feel horrible. Have you heard a good word? Do you have any sense about when you may go home? You just idle, it seems like idle chatter, but you just listen more than you think about what you're going to say. This is what I've had with interns. I had 10 interns in Perkins, and I'd let them go with me to the hospital a couple, 3 times. And I'd say it's about being present in the moment rather than trying to figure out what you're going to do or how uncomfortable you may feel. I've been in some very uncomfortable situations. And I had to learn, for example, that in order to be in ministry, I couldn't think about how I was feeling. I had to focus on the person. So while we think this is difficult, it's difficult if you're thinking about what you're going to say. Think about how you would lovingly respond. Just listen so closely. And you don't have to talk. I'm a fast talker. I mean that in a good sense. I go to a congregation, they say, hey, Mike, you preach too fast. And I said, well, I think you need to listen faster. But here it's okay to let a little silence, not too much silence, just sort of stay. And don't stay too long. I always value human touch. I think that's important in appropriate ways. If I were going to pray, I would always hold the other person's hand. And I'd be careful what I prayed for. I never said things like, we pray that God's will be done in this place. And the reason why is that, God's will may be for the person to live and the person may not. So we don't want to, God's not choosing the time you're going to die necessarily. I could go out here and make the wrong turn and all of a sudden I don't think it was God's will that I make the wrong turn. Do you see what I'm saying? So let's be careful about how we do that. But I always prayed for the person who would experience God's presence, God's care, God's healing for one's spirit. And I'd say, and I always give thanks for physicians and nurses and all who are really the instruments of God's healing. So that's how I did this. I think if you're a caring person and you don't inquire too much and you just listen, it means everything. It's like when I tell people about what do I say with someone who's suffered a loss in terms of a death in the family. And we're so afraid of silence. But human touch is important. And just the fact that we convey that we care is important. And if you're coming on behalf of your Sunday school class, name it and claim it, And I want to say, how many of you have Stephen ministers in your church? We have a lot of Stephen ministers at Hearst, and there are times I thought it was great, and times we couldn't keep them employed. And by that I don't mean employed, deployed. But there was a piece of that was good in terms of helping people learn how to do that. But great clergy. You don't need a bishop to tell you how to do this. So access your clergy, and there's some people who do this well as a layperson. So that's my little short course. Unless you want me to come visit one day. just follow me around. You know, if I walked in the room of a hospital with a lay person, they may think they're really in trouble. It just dawned on me. Howard Deaconess is educated in the North Texas Conference. We're not at this time, and it's not something the conference does. What is the role of deaconesses in the North Texas Conference? I do not know that we have an active deaconess right now. I think we have, do we?
Yes.
Who?
Sandy with W in Lake Highlands.
Is she a deaconess or a local pastor?
No, she's not local.
Okay. I'm really, if we had, so I didn't know that. She's working with the ministry at the apartment complex, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is an active service. The role of the deaconess, that's not being as active as it once was. I've got to be honest about that. So, so I really don't have anything to say. I do know about the apartment ministry at Lake Highlands, which is a significant ministry to a population we've not reached. And I know we're using a local pastor there, and I didn't know Sandy was a deaconess. So that's news to me, and I was with her for a couple of days at a Ministry with the Poor roundtable. So that's one that's currently active, and so people back in the room knew more about that than I did. How can the United Methodist Women be more in touch with the members of their church, and what role do you see for the future? Well, so I want you to hear this in the spirit in which I say it, because this is the way in which I talked about it in the local congregation. The First United Methodist Church of Hearst, and in fact, the last 3 churches I served had very active United Methodist women. And it really made my job easier theologically, because you had a host of people who had been through some of the UMW studies that were well acquainted with some of the mission field or things that were happening. I do not know what it is, but often that whatever the study, the area of study geographically is for United Methodist women, 2 years later or the year thereof is something that the world's eyes may be focused on. So it became a way for people to become aware of that. Secondly, in terms of mission and in terms of issues about culture, the society, poverty, social justice, it became a way in which people, women, became very formed about the role of the church. And so that made it, I think that made it easier to talk about difficult things in terms of poverty, let's say, or hunger, or the role of women. Any number of things. And so I have to applaud United Methodist Women for the work they do, and I truly affirm that. This is the challenge, and I said this, and the United Methodist Women at Hearst started making a little bit of shift on this, and they've created in the last 3 years a couple of women's circles for younger women. People don't like to go to organization meetings anymore. And if you hear this in a negative way, United Methodist Women, this is said with great appreciation for the mission, but a concern about the model. More women are working outside the home. If they're raising children, if they're single parent or even if they're not, there is a great amount of time spent in terms of when you get home with those children. People don't want to go to a business meeting for the most part. My life's built around them sometimes, but they're fewer and far between. Most of them are ministry meetings. And they want to gather to do ministry or to learn. I'll never forget, Joan was in a woman's club in Fort Worth, and she just dropped out. And I said, well, I thought you wanted to do that. She goes, when we started talking for 20 minutes about whether we were going to serve lemonade or iced tea at the luncheon, I decided my life had more important things to do. And I want to hear, now look, I want to say this. Lots of things talked at any business meeting are not important. Can be decided by 3 or 5 people. But when you have 30 or 40 people talking about things that can be decided pretty quickly, you ought to ask yourself, is this our mission? Or is this a model that we've adopted? So anyway, so I think that's my challenge now, Methodist Women. Look at the model, determine how you can reach people, determine how people can get engaged, and be willing to do some different things that may be a little different from what the women's division says to do. But I would really, I affirm the commitment to mission and study the United Methodist Women bring. And frankly, any mission that we have as a denomination has its origin and its strength in the place of women in the earliest days of our mission movement of the late 19th century. Had it not been for United Methodist Women and really its predecessor organizations, we would not have the mission outreach that we do globally that we enjoy today. So I'm for United Methodist Women. I think we need to start talking about that model and being open to it and not get our feelings hurt about it. But realize that the mission is more important than the model, and how can you change the model to reach younger women and to do that well. So that's my take on UMW. So what are the metrics of clergy effectiveness? That's what the team that I appointed, that I probably ran through too quickly and so didn't provide the clarity that's needed, is working on, is what are those metrics. And we're not only going to use metrics, but we're going to use a narrative in terms of this. And we're going to use the discipline. It becomes the easiest way to gauge clergy effectiveness. And the marks of fruitfulness, is it going to be revamped? That is understudy. I mean, that group is working on it. But as I read it, I need to tell you, when I read the reports this year that were filled out on behalf of clergy, and the clergy filled out if they did it, that became this is more helpful than I thought. And so I'd encourage its use. And what happens is we're making, I didn't know if you knew this is the time we make appointments. When we get in that room, we start talking about things, then we begin to refer to the church profile, and we see virtually nothing, then this makes it hard. Or if the pastor doesn't fill out the report, and we're trying to figure out if he or she would be a candidate for something, then it's difficult to know. So many churches don't take this seriously in pastors, so I encourage you to do it. It may not be perfect, but it's what we use. It's one of the pieces we use in this, and I want you to know that. Okay. There's a majority of small churches that expect. Can't read it. Why don't you consolidate these churches? That's basically what it is. Have you tried to do that? I'm coming with Teflon body on to do that, I want to tell you. How many of you want to consolidate your church? I mean, let's be honest about it. Okay, now all joking aside, that may become a more effective way to do ministry. Letter from a layperson in another district. I love it when I go to another district and talk about another district. But this is the letter. Not signed, by the way. Now, this is what happens to unsigned letters in my office. Trash. There's nothing I can do with them. I know what town it's from, but we have several Methodist churches in that town, so I don't even know what church it is. Don't know how to talk about it. And so they can't do certain things. And they can't. And can they... I know what they want to do. They wanted to, and this is a non-debatable item, that's not the way we do ministry as a United Methodist Church. And if you'll do that, but we don't want to have a part-time pastor. Well, maybe a part-time pastor would be the way for them to do more ministry, if it frees some dollars up. What they don't know, if you had a part-time pastor, it would also reduce their apportionments. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think we have to be realistic about this. If we're talking about, and this is something, we can't subsidize pastors' salaries. There's not enough money to do that. And every time we do that with a church, it means there's money that we're not doing with ministry to reach new people. So the reason we have charges is because that's the way Methodism got its start. And it means it sort of returns the work of our Christ to the people. So hey, we're going to have to put some churches together. Here's another aha moment, and I speak about this in terms of Dallas more than anywhere else, it's like, how do you have a church in a great area in the city that is just doing nothing? What do we need to do to help that church become more effective and fruitful? And so I talk about what are the strategies we're going to use all across the conference in terms of reaching the mission field instead of protecting clergy, and to be honest, protecting churches. Because what we really all desire, if you really think about it, in the deep core of your being and soul, you want your church, you want to care about everybody in it, but you also know there's somebody out there who has no faith community. And I hope and pray to God that's the most important piece of why you exist. So that is becoming the way in which we're talking about several pieces. Okay, let me say this one next. What is a reconciling congregation? So a reconciling congregation is part of the reconciling movement that is not an official part of the United Methodist Church, but is one of the unofficial caucuses. There are many. And the reconciling movement is basically advocates for the full inclusion of gay and lesbian persons in the life of the church, which means they advocate for same-gender marriage and for the ordination of self-avowed practicing homosexuals. So that's what the reconciling movement does. We have 4 reconciling congregations in North Texas. And you can go on the Reconciling Ministries page and find out how to do that. But this isn't something that the conference does. It's not something you do through the conference. And so I think I need to say that. So that's what a reconciling congregation is. And how you do that is with them, and I don't know how you do that. But this is what I can tell you. It does not happen easily within a congregation. If you choose to do that, I'm not advocating one way or the other here. And I won't spring this on people without a lot of work. Okay? Because anytime you do something different, something that some people may be uncomfortable with, it's best to not just sort of, let's get together for a vote one night and decide this. And that's, I don't know what the genesis of the question is or where it's coming from, but I don't know how to become a reconciling congregation. I've never pastored a reconciling congregation, but I know that network can help you. But even before you did that, I think it'd be helpful that you had another kind of conversation with inside your church, rather than sort of getting something started that may or may not be the wishes of most people. So there's another piece here. Do you have something to say about loving others unlike yourself? Well, people who are unlike me is everybody I meet, and we're all different. And that being said, I think the question is really about something deeper than, broader than that. I talked about women several minutes ago in terms of embracing clergy women as a pastor. But we've got to remember, we're not the judge here. And sometimes people who are different from us, we tend to think because they're different from us, that means they're not as good as we are. I mean, that's the subtle message. So loving someone in this manner in which God talks about love is a decision that you make. And the decision you make is am I going to see people, try to see people as God sees them? A beloved child of God. And that doesn't mean you have to like them. I mean, we don't like everybody we come in contact with. And I'm not talking about that in a negative way, but we can love everybody we come in contact with. It doesn't mean that I'm going to invite them over for dinner at our house. Well, I'd ask Joan first anyway, to be clear about that. But you know, this love, as it refers to in the gospel, in which Jesus talks about, is the way in which we view people, and the way in which we treat them, and the way in which we advocate for them, and the way in which we embrace them and welcome them. And we need to remember that any United Methodist Church, when we use this tag that we've been using about open hearts, open minds, open doors, is really a way of describing the way in which we are all challenged to see others as God sees them. And so I've been very clear in some recent settings that if any person, regardless of anything of how different they may, regardless of differences, I mean, male, female, skin color, orientation, everybody is welcome in a United Methodist Church. I mean, we just got to be honest. I mean, we are not shutting the door on a child of God. Everybody with me? So we don't do that. And if we have a clergy person who somehow believes we have to qualify somebody's entrance, then we need to have a serious conversation. And frankly, what sets us apart from the culture is the way we are called to view, treat, and love people. Sometimes we allow what's going on in the culture, even politically, to influence how we react to people. I believe God's calling us to a higher level of being and doing than that. And so, anyway, I think that's a challenge for all of us. And it's been a challenge for me sometimes in my own life, with people who may disagree with me, but I want you to know that it's amazing how somebody's different opinion or even differences may actually speak to us in a way we would not have known had we not had that conversation or that relationship. Okay, I got several about the zip code, so let me just sort of talk about this somewhat. I know there's been a meeting in Clarksville, because I was just told about it Tuesday night. So let me talk about the zip code. So there's several questions. They involve money. Where do you send your money? You know, you can give your money to your local church, put a zip code project in, and they'll know to send it to the conference and how to do that. So I'm going to say that we trust that treasurers do the right thing. Some of us talked about the dispersal of money. So if I give the money here, will it stay here? Will it go to Dallas? So I need to tell you, when it comes, we're spending it wherever we need it. And so it's not like somebody's going to get more than the other. It's like when we get ready to deploy something, we'll have the money. And so we're going to keep an accounting, but we're not going to, at this time, the decision's not made to decide Dallas versus Red River County. Because if we do that, there may not be enough for Red River County. You see what I'm saying? So we're equally committed to both zip codes. They have very different ways in which we're going to do mission and ministry in those zip codes. It could require more funds to do one over another any particular year. So we're not going to spend a lot of time trying to keep that straight. What we're going to do is we're going to trust you, trust ourselves, trust our God, that we're going to do the right thing with money at the right appropriate time. But it's not like we're going to put, if we got $1 million tomorrow, I can assure you that we wouldn't split it half and half. I can assure you we wouldn't give 3/4 of it to Dallas. I can assure you we'll decide what's going to be the most systemic, the best bang for the buck we can get, and where is it needed. There are times we think that we may need more in Red River County. We think we have ways of using people of influence in Dallas and tapping into resources there uniquely. I mean, with all the nonprofits and some interested people in the zip code. So what I want to say is zip code money is going to be zip code money, and we're going to be totally fair. And the reason we're going to be totally fair is we particularly chose an urban zip code, and we particularly chose a zip code in a rural area because we wanted to do this well in both places. And it was a way in which we could form our ministry. And we think that every time we think of ministry with the poor and overwhelming the denomination, people don't think about rural areas. And we are so focused on how we get this right that we're going to deploy one GBGM developer there and one GBGM developer in Dallas. And so it's going to be equal, is whatever equal means, or fair. I better not use equal. Because, your children, Remember, they're younger, they wanted equal treatment. So it's going to be, we're going to do this fairly, and I can promise you that your money will be well spent, and we will not waste it. I think this is, if we want to help East Texas Conference, we don't have an East Texas Conference, the East District, who do we send it to? If it's zip code money, I think I've spoken to that. I think the best, if I've not been clear, you have a deeper question about that, I invite you to call Vic Casad, your district superintendent. Talked about how to send the monies. Let me go through it. So I got 3 or 4 questions about money. So I want to say this again. I promise you, I think there may be a question of trust here. And I understand that. So let me, I promise you, we're going to do this right and fairly. And you don't have any reason to believe that we can be trusted doing this, you think. You have it on my word that we are as committed to 75426 as we are to 75215. And I promise. And actually, we will know where the money comes from when you send it through your church, because it comes from an East District church, and we'll know it. The district that ought to be concerned about the money is the Northwest District. They don't even have a zip code in the project, and we're asking them to help fund this. So it's a conference initiative, and we're going to do well. How will the information on the zip code project progress and be available? Actually, this is a conversation that's emerged in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I sort of wait for them to emerge before I weigh in, and I knew this was going to be a problem. I'm driving. I'm not being helpful to you, am I? Would you rather me just stand still? It's not going to happen. Okay, we need to wind this up here. So actually, we are working on a way in which we're going to use a piece of the website to do that and do progress and that kind of thing. And our communications team doesn't know this. I got approached by from the PR communications department at SMU about them working on this for us for little or no fee, a group of students. And I actually like the idea because I think it's a great project for students, and secondly, because I think they'll work hard at it. And I think we're going to need lots of help with this. So, I mean, there are lots of things we're going to do, but soon we'll start working on that, and you can know by the website, but it's not up. But we will send, when we put it up on the website, I'll cut a video and we'll send an email to everybody whose email address we have, and we'll announce it, and that's the way to go. Okay, so I've taken longer than I expected to, and it's getting close to lunchtime, and I just looked at my watch, and I apologize, I talked too long. But what I want to tell you is I want to thank you for who you are and for what you do. And frankly, there are people you've met before in your life who really are committed to Jesus simply because of your life and because of who you are. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for caring for people in your congregation and your community. I want to thank you for the way in which you support your pastor. But most importantly, I want to thank you for being a follower of Jesus and representing the Christ in the world that desperately needs to hear the story that you have to share. I enjoy being here today. And some people thought I was crazy to do this in every district. And I said, well, there are only 4. I have colleagues who have 16. So this has been a lot easier than some of my colleagues would have done. And just to be with you and to hear you and to have the conversations I've had with some of you personally and privately, to answer your questions and get to share what I think is exciting work ahead for the North Texas Conference to reach the mission field, that God has placed us uniquely in this place and this time to do that which God expects and needs each and every one of us to do. So, God bless you. Go in peace. Do you want me to give the benediction? What do we do?
I had asked Jim Skaggs to do that.
Oh,
But
let's
I
say-
need to make an announcement.
Oh, an announcement. But thank you for letting me be here so very much, and thank you.